Hey, what's up? It's Duskmos, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the OP-1 field from Teenage Engineering. So I thought it would be appropriate to make a video like this because I did one for the Dirty Wave M8 and really just kind of talked about what I liked and didn't like about that device. And because I purchased the OP-1 field to replace that, I thought it was only fair that I did the same for this. So I know everyone's familiar, you've seen the OP-1 around. It's been kind of a staple and also a little bit controversial, but it's been around for over a decade now. And yeah, people have made some really amazing stuff with the OP-1. And I have to admit, I was interested in it the second I first laid eyes on it. The first version with its kind of colorful knobs and really minimal aesthetic and fun display. And I think it's the first time I ever saw an OLED display on anything, and even that was really interesting. And being someone interested in design and visual aesthetics, I was instantly drawn to it because the industrial design itself was just so appealing. And this is the field version. It's the replacement to the original version, which there's been small tweaks in between, but this is definitely more like a Gen 2 product. And it's got a lot of changes. Teenage Engineering claims there's 100 differences between the last version and this one. Some of them are more substantial changes than others, but nonetheless, it's definitely an upgraded version. Namely, the OP-1 is a polyphonic synth. It's a sampler. It's a sequencer with different sequencing modes. There's a vocoder in it. There's an arranger with a 4-track tape recorder with different styles of tape in the field version. And it's velocity sensitive and it's all stereo with a high bit rate audio processing. And this thing is just a little mini powerhouse. And I'm not going to go into all the details about all the features and what it all can do and can't do and comparing it to other devices, really. That'll be, other people have done that to no end, and there's a lot of good info already out there about that. So really, this is just sort of like my take on it. And I've used it some. I've really enjoyed using it, but I have a lot of other gear, and I don't always reach for this. But when I do, it's always a really fun experience. And just wanted to share where I'm coming from. Still learning it a bit, and it does a whole lot, as I mentioned. But let's talk some pros and cons, at least for what I've figured out about it for myself to this point. So first up, one of the things that I don't love about it, but it is also sort of a secret pro as well, is that it records to audio only. So you're not recording sequencing data. You're not recording, like effects sends and like MIDI tweaks and things like that. You're only recording the audio in the device itself on one of those 4 tracks. And so that's a very different way of working that may not be to everyone's taste. For me, it's interesting. I like recording and committing things, but then I also really like being able to go in and edit and, move notes around and things like that if something feels a little bit off. But when you're recording to audio, as you are in the OP-1, you're not able to go in and make those little minor tweaks, which in one way is a good thing because you're committing what you've done to the recording. But in another, if it's 99% there, not being able to tweak that one little last thing, is kind of something that you have to work around. But it also forces you to work in a way that is a bit different than probably what you're used to. And I think that's a benefit in its own right, which, like I said, I'll talk about later. So the way the OP-1 works is you record to audio, but you also record to tapes, and tapes are essentially your projects. And while I understand there are limitations with how much storage you can save and how much data you want to commit to each of these projects, I'm not a super big fan of how there's a limited number of tapes. So you can only basically have 8 projects going at any given time. And of those 8, each one can only be 6 minutes long. And so for me, in the way I've used this so far, I like to use it as sort of like a sketch pad, noodle around, make some loops, kind of figure out some cool stuff, and then kind of just move on. But I like to keep all of those projects as active things I can come back to and, chop up and mess around with. And if you can only have 8 at a time, especially when I'm only recording a short snippet, like it might be a few bar loop or something. It feels a little bit crippling because I can only have 8 of those short snippets, basically, even though I could use 6 minutes worth. So I could make one project where I take the first, 30 seconds and make it one idea and then skip forward in the tape and then make the next section, more ideas. You could work in that way. And I guess that would be kind of a workaround, but I like having them separated out, and I like being able to load up individual, projects. And being able to only do 8 of those at a time feels a little bit limited. Now, I also feel that navigating between each of these tapes or projects is a little bit cumbersome, especially the navigation window. As you go through, you choose which tape style it is. So if you have like the disc mini, which is like the mini disc emulation versus like the reel-to-reel or Porta Studio, if you don't know which project you have that saved under which type, it's almost like that's the parent folder. And so you have to load those up and give them a listen and be like, oh, no, this isn't the right one. I had that over here. And it just feels like a little bit cumbersome. You can, of course, rename the projects in the OP-1 UI. So that'll help you navigate around. But I don't know. I like that when, say, on like an Electron box, you can, of course, rename those as well. But you can just go to like B2 and A3, like banks and patterns. And those are really easy to jump between, which just a little bit faster workflow. Minor gripe, though. Another thing I don't love with the OP-1 is that there's no DIN MIDI out of the box. There's USB MIDI, which is great for a lot of people, but not for me. I mean, I have pretty much all hardware. I don't really work in the box at all, except for when I'm recording. And even then, I keep it pretty minimal. So I like to have hardwired connections between my different boxin, and without MIDI DIN, it's hard to do. You can get converter boxes that you can, plug the USB into and then get MIDI out of it, but it just, it wouldn't hurt to be able to have like just another jack on the OP-1 that would be a MIDI connection. Now, I know in a lot of modern boxes, there are protocols built in that allow things to communicate over USB to send MIDI back and forth, but not all of them support that. And it'd be something that I wish was here. And finally, with mine, I did have a couple of the knobs crack, and wasn't from pressure or impact or mistreatment. I've barely left with this, and I haven't dropped it or anything like that. I haven't sat anything on top. Kept it in the case when I'm not using it. It's just down to the plastics they used on the knobs themselves. I seem to have had a little bit of a manufacturing issue early on. But Teenage Engineering was really cool and sent out replacement knobs really fast. I had them within a few days and just popped them off and put the new ones on. So problem solved, but it wasn't something I was expecting. And I have to admit, they were hairline cracks, so it wasn't like they, were shearing off or anything. It was just I noticed little line and I thought it was like, oh, there's a hair on the knob, like I'll get that rid of that. And it wouldn't move, and I realized, oh, it's just a little micro crack. And that stuff happens, and it's nice that it was on a knob and not like across the like one of these panels or something. Okay, so that's it for my personal gripes, but now let's talk about some of the good stuff. All right, so I'm going to contradict myself a little bit here, and I actually think that recording to audio can actually be sort of fun, even though it's a limitation. It's a different way of working, like I'd said earlier, and yeah, it's not the same as, step sequencing something and being able to infinitely tweak. Like having to commit isn't the worst thing always. And for me, I like that it's a different way of working compared to all the other stuff that I have. Forces me to kind of approach things a little bit differently, and it's kind of fun actually, like navigating around and chopping the audio and stuff. Like it reminds me almost like editing video and like non-linear editing where you're cutting and splicing and dropping and lifting and all that stuff. The different tape styles are really cool. They lend different characteristics to the sounds, and the different tape tricks behave differently, which is pretty cool too. And I really like recording stuff in and then slowing it way down. It's almost like when you record to tape, it's like you're sampling yourself into a sampler, and then you're just pitching stuff, slowing stuff down. So that can get really experimental and really cool. And I always have fun with that. I'm always like pitching stuff, slowing stuff down. It's really cool. I think the OP-1 sounds great. There's lots of synth models and sound options right out of the box, and that's really cool. And if you're not happy with that, like what it comes with, then you can sample into it really easily, and allows you to turn anything into a chromatic, playable, polyphonic synth sound, which is really fun. I've had other things that sample and you can play chromatically, it'll pitch it to the keys, but not polyphonic. And so you don't get that, overlapping of notes. This is the first machine that I think that I've had that you can sample and just right out of the gate play that sample polyphonically. And it's really fun. And definitely there's a lot of room for creativity and making your own sounds, which is really useful and I think comes in handy for sound design and creating something unique. Obviously, this thing is crazy portable. It's less portable than like the Dirty Wave M8 or some of the even smaller kind of things, but it's like this isn't a burden, like it's really easy to just throw in a bag and take with you. And that's really nice because it lends itself to using it. Like I take it outside, like I've taken it to like a brewery and just like hanging out, like making some stuff, working on a project. And yeah, it's cool. The battery life is stupid. Like it's just insane how long this thing lasts. I've only had to charge it a few times and that's absurd. Like I love that. It doesn't need to even be as good as it is, but it's really impressive that it is as good as it is. And yeah, that's super nice. On the field version, it's got the passive bass radiator on the back and the front speaker. And it sounds good. Like it doesn't fill a room or anything, but having a built-in speaker that actually has a little bit of bass and sounds pretty decent and gets pretty loud in a pinch or in whatever kind of scenario where you might be using the external speaker, really cool that it's there and you can just sit and play and enjoy it. It's great for casual jamming and those times when you don't have headphones, but you're in a space where you can actually turn up something and have a little fun. Speaking of fun, there are the different sequencer modes in the OP-1, which I find fun, and they lead to creativity. There's the different like random ones, like the one that spins where you can open up and change the shape and the notes fall as balls and they bounce around. Like there's some wild options for sequencing in the OP-1, and it definitely has a way to lead you down paths or take you to some outcomes that are pretty different. In the field version, you've got the velocity sensitive keyboard, which is nice for extra expression and playability across the keys. And yeah, it's cool. You get the little gentle touches, or you can really kind of hammer on it and get full volume. Yeah, that's just a nice extra layer to make things sound a little bit more natural. And kind of lastly, the effects I think are really great in the OP-1. I like that they keep adding them, like they just added Terminal. Mother was a really great addition to the field. Yeah, and it's just cool that they're updating and they're adding, and I think there's still a lot of changes that are going to be coming to the OP-1 as time goes on, just to make it even more compelling and interesting, and I think the effects are already proof of that. I told myself I wasn't going to do this, but let's talk about cost. So yeah, it cost $2,000. That's a good amount of money for most people. Teenage Engineering reminds me of companies like Bang & Olufsen, for example. They make really high-end audio equipment with, metal construction, like beautiful aluminum and glass and wood, and there's motorized things, and a lot of just energy and effort and design was put into the aesthetics as much as the performance of the product itself. And things of quality and design and build like this and like that just cost more money. You think of like economies of scale, Teenage Engineering isn't Roland or Yamaha. They are working with a smaller team, producing things in smaller numbers for a smaller group of the population. And so because of that, those are just things that I think lead to expense. And like Bang & Olufsen, for example, people who are interested in that kind of experience, who want those types of materials, who care about those sorts of things, will pay a little bit of extra money for them. Like a Rolls Royce is still just a car. Like a Honda Fit can get you from A to B exactly the same as a Rolls Royce can, except for the fact that the Rolls Royce is leather and wood and like beautiful craftsmanship and hand tailored bits and pieces, and things are just next level. It still is just a car. But you take away the build quality and high-end materials and the design and the sound deadening and the ride quality. Like, would it still be a Rolls Royce? No, it would be a car, but it would be a less expensive car. And there are other portable music making devices out there that fit categories and satisfy different parts of the market that the OP-1 doesn't fit into and doesn't satisfy. You've got the like Roland boutiques and the IRA stuff and the Korg Volcas and all the little portable things that are fantastic. And I think they're great that they're approachable and at a price point that most people can afford. And it's just a different category, a different part of the market. And I think those have merit too. Like, I love other things that cost a lot less, that as opposed to things that are way more money. Like, I have the Buchla music easel, and that thing is $3,000, and it's a synth, and it doesn't even have a screen. Like, it's got tons of sliders and controls and stuff, but it doesn't do a fraction of what the OP-1 does. And yet it's 50% more expensive than this is. So I think it's a lot about perspective. And this thing does a ton. Like, I'd literally say this is a powerhouse by comparison, and well worth it from that perspective. So like, if the OP-1 Field isn't worth it to you, that's totally cool. Like, there are other products out there at all price points. And yeah, I mean, personal choice is real. You can never get this and be fine. And you could own 3 of them. You do you. And if you're just starting out, you're in school, you work only like part-time, or you don't have that much money to spend on your hobbies, you have to like support family and things like that, like whatever your circumstances, there are so many things out there, and this is just another option. You look at somebody who has like a whole studio full of outboard gear, like this thing costs less than a mid-level rack mount compressor. Like, I was poking around on Vintage King the other day, and I saw like $3,000 for a compressor, $2,500. Like, you can spend a ton of money on things, and you look at this compared to just one compressor, it's insane. This is like a UFO, and that's like a couple rocks starting a little spark. I don't know, it's a weird example, but you know what I mean. It's all about perspective, and I personally think the OP-1 Field is worth the cost of entry. So in summary, I'm still learning the OP-1, and I've had it, like I said, for just about a year, almost exactly, but I haven't used it every day. I haven't even used it every week. But when I have used it, I have enjoyed it, and I'm not sure what my main use case is for it yet, but I'm still feeling it out. So far, I've really enjoyed noodling on it. I like, coming up with little synth riffs. I like having a poly synth this size, being able to just play chords and do cool little riffs and things and just loop it in, record it and tweak it and pitch it up and slow it down and add some of the effects. It's definitely a fun sketch pad. I take it outside. It's easy just to grab and sit on the sofa or whatever. Like my Electron stuff, I really enjoyed like the Syntact and the Digitone and stuff like that. That box is is a nice size, but obviously having to wall tether it without doing that battery mod thing. is, it's kind of a hindrance to making something easy to use in a portable kind of casual fashion. And this, allows you to do that. Like I said, I've taken it to a local brewery a couple times, and that's really enjoyable. I just like sit and have a beer and people watch and noodle and work on tracks. And it's a fun way to pass the time. Maybe some compromises might have been made in workflow because it's such a small platform, with a small screen and stuff. But the stuff that this thing can do is pretty mind-blowing when you think about everything that it's capable of. There's tons of features even built in that I probably won't even use, like some of the FM transmitting stuff and some of the Bluetooth MIDI things. And I'll try those things out, I think. But it's just cool that there's so much packed in. It really is a full audio workstation in a slim, portable package with just like a ridiculous battery life. So I don't know what else you could ask for. Yeah, maybe if it was a little bit less expensive, more people would be happy, but I don't think it's overpriced for what it is. I've seen people do full tracks on this thing that are amazing. I know very famous artists have used it to create even full albums, and that's super cool too. Like, it clearly is capable enough if you are willing to put in the time and get everything that you can out of this. And I think that makes it worth every penny. And I'm not there yet. I'm not even pretending to be there yet because I have a lot more I can learn and a lot more things I can get better at on the OP-1. But that's what having gear is all about. Like, trying stuff out, trying out new workflows, seeing how things work and fit into your life. And I think for me, the small portable size with the battery and all the feature set this can do and the slightly new way of working, I think that is enough to keep me interested and invested in the OP-1 and wanting to get better at it and put more energy into seeing where I can take this thing and really fit it into my workflow. But that's going to be it for me. Thank you for watching and listening and having this, not really conversation, but it can turn into one if you comment. But yeah, just let me know what you think. And until then, I got to get better at it. And yeah, so stick around for that. But anyway, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.